Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sawblades64, and I'm joined alongside.
Anderson9132, the Robot Wars Guru.
And Steve, the American Killjoy, and I'm driving in my car.
Oh yes, well, Steve, it's tradition that you be driving in your car on these things these days.
I'm always either going to or coming back from school to do these things.
I'm going to say this now, I'm afraid. I mean, it's not technically driving when you're on the wrong side of the road with a steering wheel on the wrong side of the car. And it's also, and I bet it's automatic as well, isn't it, Steve? Is it automatic?
It is.
Oh.
How else could I be doing this without? Oh, come on. How else could I be doing this? I couldn't write a manual and also talk to you.
It's
That's
fine.
impossible.
It's easy. You can do that.
For us sophisticated Brits, Steve, it's easy.
Oh, dear me. Anyway,
What's funny is I think the European country that did switch sides in the middle of just one time, and everybody had to learn to drive on the wrong side of the road. I don't remember which.
I can't remember. But anyway, enough about driving. We are here to talk about BattleBots 2018 seasons, episode 15, which is the USA versus the rest of the world special, I guess you could say. Quite an interesting selection of fights. You know, there's no real main event. I suppose that the pseudo main event would be Sawblades and Endgame. You know, they're probably the two highest ranked machines in the episode, so I guess that's kind of the main event, if you like. But overall, quite a varied and wide selection of machines from both sides, really.
Just want to say, I think it's blatant plagiarism. This is from BattleBots. You know, obviously our international specials. I think they saw that and thought we can cash in on that, and there you go.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
Where's come back with a big card?
I don't know about.
Fair, you have Team USA versus the rest of the world. What's the difference? Oh yeah, ours is Team UK. Sorry, I forgot. No, I'm joking. Obviously, I'm joking.
Of course, but obviously, you know, the machines that are representing the rest of the world. You know, there's a variety of. You know, there are some big hitters in there. You know, obviously, they didn't have robots like Monsoon and Minotaur. Those kind of teams, I guess, at this point, we're trying to think maybe not worth going in for the last 16. You know, if we're going to be fighting in the last 16, something like along those kind of lines, probably not worth risking ourselves more and taking more damage. You know, maybe, or from what I understand, at least. You know. Yeah.
Then I wonder the robot, and I said this earlier before we started, that the fact that maybe these robots that we saw, this set of robots, maybe who knows how far they went in the top 16 because they still wanted more fights. You know, maybe they still had an axe to grind. You know.
Maybe. No, who knows? I know some things about this. We'll cover this again in a later episode, I'm sure. But
Right.
We'll get back to that eventually. Anyway, let's talk about the fights themselves, shall we? We'll start off with somewhat a controversial fight between Blacksmith and Warhead. First of all, a great choice to have these two go against each other. Two spectacular fighting robots against each other. Lots of fire, lots of aggression. Really great fun fight.
Stupid T-Rex head.
Yeah,
That's all we've got left. The disc split in half.
I know. The disc is no longer a disc, is it?
No.
I'll let them off this one time.
And for my 2 cents, it's just a good fun fight. And I know a lot of people out there say why didn't Blacksmith win the fight because it was generally more aggressive. Warhead controlled the fight for the most part. I can see why people kind of like, why did Blacksmith win it? I think it was very close between the two. It could have gone either way. Go on.
I wouldn't want to be a judge. It was really, really close. I mean, you see all the hits that Blacksmith gets in, and it's what was it hitting? It's hitting the eyebrows, the little tire eyebrows of Warhead on that T-Rex head. Yeah, it was a really crazy fiery fight. I mean, it was a firefight. It was nuts. I mean, there was so much to keep track of. Yes, Warhead did really get a couple of grips in, and it does control a lot of the fight, especially with that front wedge it has those little hooks that kind of point up that kind of hooked Blacksmith, and you actually see Al talk a couple times, say, "Hey, I can't move. They're grabbing me. I can't get off of them." So that actually probably helped Warhead kind of get those points, where it's kind of Blacksmith stuck, and it's just wailing away, and it's trying. But it's was to no avail, unfortunately, in the judges' eyes.
Yeah, I know they commented after the fight, in the pits. They talked about their the shoulder, I guess, if you like, of Warhead getting damaged by the axe or the hammer, whatever you want to call it. It was a good tactical fight. As much as it wasn't, it wasn't that high action, high tempo, high action. It was a really good war of attrition, and I think that both teams put on a really good show. Anderson, I know you've got strong feelings, as is normal with you.
Yeah, as is normal. I don't think Warhead should have won this one, but I'm going to keep my ranting to a minimum because at the end of the day, this isn't really a episode to be taken seriously. It's just a bit of fun. Some teams had some extra fights they wanted to have, and they had them. And to be fair, it was a good, solid fight overall. So it's not like I'm completely against the decision. I just personally think that Warhead should have lost, but still, great fight, nice tactical.
And Steve's
back and
gone.
forth action, lots of hits, and Steve's gone because he's American. I'm joking. I love him, really. Bless his heart. It's because he's driving. Probably went through a tunnel or something.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
yeah. So, like I said, good, close, back and forth action. It was a good fight, and to be fair, it was a close decision. But I still think Blacksmith, on aggression, I think more than anything, I think should have just about swung it. But that's just me. Should have swung it because it's an axe.
For God's sake.
By the way, you did say you didn't know whether to call it an axe or a hammer. I think you should call it a flaming axe hammer O''death.
I like that. I like that name a lot. With that said, that means 1 point to the...
abbreviations.
Yeah, I think so. Leave your suggestions for the name of Blacksmith's weapon in the comments. Moving on to our next fight, we saw a team that we haven't seen since all the way back at the start of the season, because there is a bit of a story behind this. Obviously, the fight is Captain Shredderator and Vanquish, the robot that got split in half. Obviously, Vanquish, Jack, bless him, Tweedy, while he was out there, he actually got very ill. So it took him, I think he was, I can't remember if he was hotel bound or something, for a good few days after the fight. He was very, very ill. And he had to come back and then rebuild the whole robot. I think he told me in like 3 days. He had to rebuild the whole thing in 3 days. And eventually, he was ready to fight in this episode, and covered with a load of eyes on his plow.
Yeah, cosplaying as the Thousand Eyes Idol from Yu-Gi-Oh!
And obviously a good, fun little intro thing with Tim from the Monsoon team as well, which is really nice to see. For the fight itself, it was a pretty entertaining fight. Vanquish was closing down the angles, was taking the hits well, and then eventually, obviously now Brian Nave back with Captain Shredderator after his trip to China. He came in, and he could kind of sell an uplifted performance. He knows how his robot works, and you could clearly see what he was properly going for and gunning for it. And
you kind of start to think of what could have been, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
More experience.
What might have been in the main competition had Shredderator had Brian with them the whole time.
Maybe.
With that said, eventually a wheel was wiped away from the face of Vanquish, and that was that really. There was not much more to do after that. There was a really good fight, but it was again another good fun fight. Two teams going for it, not holding back, and it was nice to see. Fun to see Vanquish fight again. Obviously we've only seen it once this season. Then it obviously got quite brutally ripped in half, but it was a really good fight. I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah. In all honesty, what I like about this tournament, because obviously, like I said, it's not really meant to be taken seriously. There's no bracket now. It's just them taking around really. They actually could go full on at it, and it's nice to see It's nice to see that two robots that we haven't really seen do very well go for it to see if we can actually get some final last bragging rights. And fair play to Shredderator for finally actually getting a win this season. It's nice to see because Shredderator is a good robot, and it's a shame to have seen it die so many times this series due to unfortunate circumstances. Fair play to Jack, bless him. He did try his hardest, and he deserves a lot of credit for rebuilding the robot so quickly. But at the end of the day, and for putting up such a damn good fight with a half-knackered robot, to be fair as well. But at the end of the day, it lost. So yeah,
it's one of those unfortunate things where the style of robot wasn't suited to him, and obviously he put up a good fight as you said, but it unfortunately just a bit too much pressure on Vanquish this time. But I'm very excited to see what he comes back with next time. Hopefully we'll get to see what he's cooking up. I know he's got something pretty special lined up, so we'll have to wait and see for that.
Ooh.
Yes. Moving on to our next fight, which saw Kraken and Red Devil. Now we actually had an offer from Matt Spurk to actually join us this evening. Unfortunately, due to his working commitments, I think he wasn't able to join us, which is a real shame because I would have loved to hear him talk about this fight with Red Devil.
Oh yeah.
Kraken really came alive, and I do wonder what might have been, with a bit more of a kind of run in this competition, because he fought Shark Oprian and Devil Deck, I think was his first fight, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, Shark Oprian won that one because I think Kraken decided to just lose tires or something. I can't remember exactly. It was a while ago. And then it fought in the Desperado tournament and got tipped over by Lockjaw, and Lockjaw obviously beat it. Had it got a Shremek, could have gone another way. Kraken seemed very good. In this fight, it came alive. I did not see this coming at all. Massive credit to the guys, for really putting on a good show and giving Red Devil an absolute beating, because they really did.
Yeah, this was a great fight, honestly, and I was really not surprised that Kraken got a really easy grip on one of those tracks, but how quickly it just debilitated that track. I think it was the right track, and it just completely it just wouldn't rotate anymore, just from that one little bite. And that's not something you would expect from a pneumatic crusher, because when we think crushers, we think hydraulics.
Yes.
Compression is bigger. That's why it's used.
Yeah.
But I'm really surprised that it was really able to debilitate the entire right side, I think, of Red Devil.
I believe so.
Yeah, and it was pretty surprising. There's nothing else I can say.
Yeah. Anderson, anything to add?
This battle reminds me, you might think I'm a bit odd saying this, but this battle reminds me of Series 4, Pussycat versus Hypnodisc, of Robot Wars, obviously. Because it's the same, similar sort of story, really. There's one that's a favourite, one that's an underdog. The underdog charges forward, uses precision driving, and using its weapon, in Pussycat's case it was a blade, in Kraken's case it's a crusher, or grabber, manages to just nick them in the right spot, and kills one side of them. And it shows, really, to be honest, I think Kraken not only can get the job done, but, like I said, I just think with a bit more precision driving, they could have done a lot better. And it's a shame, really, because he is a really good driver. From what we saw in that battle, he was absolutely fantastic. The driving was just incredible. It's a shame to see Red Devil lose, obviously, because it's our baby. But,
my baby.
At the end of the day, it's got a good track record.
Yes.
No, but in all fairness, fair play to Kraken. Great final performance, honestly, and I look forward to hopefully seeing it again in potential BattleBots Season 4 if we get that. So,
Fingers
it needs a Shremek. It needs a Shremek, and it needs some side protection, and maybe like some Hardocks on the sides to protect those wheels, and it could be scary.
Yeah, a bit bigger crusher. Just rebuild the robot, mate.
but in fairness, I don't know if it's his first attempt at a heavyweight, or I haven't really done much research. I do apologise, Matt, if you are listening. Like for first attempt at BattleBots with which is a lot more arty than, say, practicality. It's got a theme. It's not necessarily just an outright, clinical robot. It's got an art presence. It's got the big anglerfish style loop over the top. It looks the part for a robot that's not really out and out practicality. This was really impressive, and fair play to the guys for getting it done. And a big win for quite a famous win, really, considering Red Devil has beaten Witch Doctor in the past, and teams like that. Fair play to the Kraken team. Big ups to them. Big ups to them. So that means
both of our fish-related robots are pretty artsy and still pretty competitive too.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see a good mix.
Yeah, absolutely. Sharko and Kraken raising it for the fish, I guess. We'll move on. We'll move on. At this point, it's 2-1 to the US. Looking pretty good at the moment. Yeah, looking pretty good at the moment for the Stars and Stripes. We'll move on to our next fight, which is Hypershock and Reality. Two similar designs in terms of weapon setup and four-wheel drive vertical spinners. Where have we seen that before? Oh boy.
Right.
Oh boy. Who knows? With that said, it was a pretty destructive fight. Hypershock was the one, literally running rings around Reality. I think Chris and Kenny were saying, it literally was by far and away the more aggressive and faster and more visually impressive robot. Mm-hmm. But Hypershock just has these gremlins, and
I know
it's so disappointing, because Will Bales built a beautiful robot. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous machine. Hypershock. No, not just this season. This season it's taken it to another level. In previous seasons as well, it's been great to watch. It's been great to watch, and I feel like there's just something missing. I don't know what it's almost like you just need to stick with a design for more than a year, and then just like, work out.
I know what's missing.
Go on.
Quality assurance.
Yes.
Just a little.
Like I understand, wanting to build a new robot every year, and I do get it. I understand what he's going with. It just feels like if he stuck with one design and for like 2 seasons, he'd iron out the kinks and he'd be right there. And it just needs it's just little tweaks. It's just small things that go wrong every time for Will. And it really hurts because it's, as I said, it's a beautiful robot. But what might have been, again, it's another case of what might have been this season for Hypershock, because the damage capacity is certainly there. It's just putting it in the box. They can't quite do it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know why. As for reality, pretty impressive. Running around chasing Hypershock down for most of the fight. They did the job. They did what they needed to do. They held out for a long while. They gave out some good hits, and I think they deserved the W in the end. They really did a good job.
Mm-hmm.
I was devastated with with
with ultraviolence.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was remembering how they wrecked it last year. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, not last year, a couple of years ago now. No, I was devastated with Hypershock. I really was, because me, I'm a big Hypershock fan. It's one of my favourites of the reboot, and I love this version. It looks good. It's sleek. It is good, but it just. And to be honest, reality. I'm not going to deny it here. They were very lucky. As a proud world supporter, they were very, very lucky here. Because I honestly, it was Hypershock's battle. It was Hypershock's battle.
Yeah,
it really was.
And they just literally died. It just stopped. Why? Why are you doing this to me, Hypershock? Like if you cried first time. Anyway. Yeah.
Dear, dear. I mean, it was.
But fair play to reality, because it is a testament to how well built that thing is. The fact that it was able to take the hits it was getting and survive.
Absolutely.
So fair play to them. I mean, they've built a very small, compact, sturdy robot there.
Yeah.
And it's great to see that. I mean, obviously, back in the day, again, sorry to go back to Robot Wars again, but obviously the Dutch wars and all that. Belgium, the Netherlands and all that. They came together. And the robots weren't amazing, but they were still good against one another. And it's nice to see how much they've advanced since then as well. And it's nice to see that there are still teams doing it for those respective countries.
Well, obviously, reality is based off Equinox, the featherweight, which was, I think, featherweight champion at some point. And obviously, it's very famous for eating a banana and dying. But reality, I think, again, with another season under their belt, I think this robot in the future could really be a contender. I think reality this season's kind of been is a victim of finding out there's little teething issues. I think considering this is the first time the heavyweight of this particular robot has been built, I think going forward it really could do a number on some other teams, and I think it's the potential's there for reality to possibly dominate going forward. We'll have to wait and see.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to what is, I suppose, the main event. It's the sort of the pseudo main event between Sawblades and Endgame. Obviously, it's a decider. It's at 2 each at this point. Sawblades and Endgame. And first of all, can we just comment on the size comparison between these two robots? Endgame was tiny compared to Sawblades. I think Sawblades
is massive.
Yes, Sawblades is a big boy. I mean, it made Bronco look small last week. For my 2 cents, it looked really, Bronco looked really tiny compared to Sawblades, and yet normally it's Bronco that's towering above everyone else. Sawblades is a big old thing, and Endgame was just teeny tiny. It could fit almost between 2 of the prongs. It was amazing to see. I like the strategy that Endgame went with, trying to use that polycarb to try and get in between the forks. Very, very clever. I rate that. In terms of the fight itself, it's a shame that Endgame. I think there was a big hit where it splits the middle pontoon of Sawblaze's prongs, and I think at that point you could kind of see a chain come off the wheels of Endgame, and I think it lost the drive on the right hand side. I want to say, I can't remember exactly. It's obviously lost drive on one of the sides, and it was a shame that it kind of petered out in that way, because Sawblades was controlling the fight as it is one to do, and obviously Endgame were delivering out those big hits. But it was a shame that we didn't get to see that for the duration. It was it turned quite scrappy about halfway through. What do you guys think?
Steve, you go first.
Okay. It was a good effort from both sides, honestly. And I expected to see some of that wedge get tore up by Endgame's spinner. I didn't expect to see it curl up on itself, but that happened. And it actually kind of prevented Sawblades from using its saw for a majority of this fight. So we really didn't get to see a lot of those fantastic sparks that we're used to seeing from Sawblades.
It was cutting through its own wedge. It was cutting through its own wedge, wasn't it? At one point, I'm sure it was.
Basically, yeah, it sure looked like it was. If it wasn't, it was sure heck, very, very close. With Endgame, it seems like, well, it's hard to play a pushing game against Sawblades. We've seen that so far.
Yeah.
Even with its two-wheel design, it's got a lot of traction. Those motors are strong. That thing bullies you all over the place, even if it is getting its ass kicked. It was interesting to see it use its flame. They're really getting into BattleBots is really getting into making sure using the flame is counted towards using a weapon. You know what I mean? Instead of actually having something physical hitting the robot, you actually have fire. Like that was also seen in the Warhead fight when it lost its disc and it was getting used more like as a hammer instead of as a full disc. They were more into favoring the fire weapon, as being kind of keeping robots away and stuff like that. Or maybe that's just the commentators trying to get everybody in. But you know what I mean. With Sawblades, it's a really good machine. But I think this is the first time we just started to see maybe some of the weaknesses of it, which is, I mean, its wedge got crumpled by Endgame spinner, and I only wonder what larger kinetic energy spinners are going to do to it. You know what I mean? Because it hasn't had extremely tough competition yet. You know what I mean?
So far, it's in the season. Up to this point, it has fought Overhaul. It has fought Mohawk. It fought Reality, and it fought Bronco. So, Reality aside, it hasn't really fought a big spinner up to this point. Obviously, now it fought Endgame, and obviously it took a few good hits. I wonder what might happen if they end up against a spinner in the future. I do think they've got what it takes to beat a horizontal. I think they've got that heavy duty plow, haven't they? Which they used against Razorback last season.
Yeah.
So they have got that if they need it, but I don't know. I think the effectiveness of Sawblades is greatly improved with the three-pronged wedge.
Yeah.
But Anderson, what did you think?
Sam, you'll remember I messaged you after watching this one. And originally I was very much against the decision. I didn't think it was really, a fair decision. But I'll be honest, looking back on it, I can't really argue it. Yeah, okay, Endgame bent a prong here and managed to chuck them over a couple of times. But at the end of the day, within, 45 seconds, they were dead on one side and were basically being pushed around the arena and just completely bossed and controlled. So, yeah, that's why I personally... So, yeah, basically, I do agree with the decision. But what I don't understand is how... And I'm going to say... I said it earlier before we started. I'm going to say it again. If Sawblades can win a fight by controlling a robot and taking... Yet despite being the one that took the most damage, how did... Warrior Dragon lose to Warhead in the previous episode when they took the most damage and got controlled all around the arena. It's just it's one of them things. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It was a good fight, fair play. Shame about Endgame, but oh well. Sawblades is king.
I can counter that with Warrior Dragon losing functionality of their weapon, and I don't know. I know that counts very hard in the judges' eyes. I know we hate that primary weapon rule. But it's
stupid.
But it's a big deal when you have to compare robots,
yeah.
And I think that really counted against Warrior Dragon in that particular fight. Warhead was still using its disc, but it was broken, but it was still in motion.
Yeah, which is actually what I said. I feel vindicated. Get in there. No, in all honesty, I could. It is a frustrating rule, but when it comes to judging criteria, I could see why it went that way. And in this case, it was more of a case of Sawblades won the other 3 points so convincingly that the damage points didn't really matter for Endgame in the end.
That's fair enough. Either way, it was a really good fight, and Sawblades, my baby, still reigns supreme.
Yeah, it was a really good fight. You know, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think as an episode as well, you know, as a little bit of light entertainment before we get into the serious nitty gritty of the bracket in the next few weeks. I think it's going to be coming very soon. You know, it's a case of, you know, this is quite a nice little breather. I think, you know, little pause in the storm, and you know, I thoroughly, you know, it was a good bit of fun. I think, you know, that's the main thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
It wasn't amazing, but it was fun.
Yeah.
It gave us a bit of a break and a gap from the norm. So
yeah, exactly.
I have no problem with it, and it gave some teams to have an excuse to have some more fights.
Yeah.
I mean, especially Tweedy with Vanquish, because I mean, imagine that you build a brand new role, you get into BattleBots, yes boys, you go against Ice Wave, and you get split in half immediately. And you're like, fuck, and then you think having to go home like that would be devastating, you know. So fair, at least he got one more fight out of it before he had to go home.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm dead chuffed for him. At least we got to see Vanquish a little bit more this season. But with that said, that's pretty much the end of the episode. You know, thank you, gents, once again for joining us. It's a pleasure as always.
As always.
Is that what you call it? I mean, yes, it's a pleasure, yeah.
Ah, dear. Anderson, you're fired.
Oh, that's sweet. Hey, give me a fucking pay slip, and then like you can fire me.
I'd like to take Anderson's third of the cut, please.
On your bike, or in your car, if you can even call it that.
Car.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Automatic gear shift.
With that said, I've been Sam64.
I've been Anderson9132, the RoboCast guru.
And I've been Steve, the American Killjoy, finally home and out of the car.
That was a nice car journey. And we'll see you next week for episode 16 of BattleBots 2018. Sayonara.